In this lecture, we will continue with what we did earlier on Dryden and his satirical poem MacFlecknoe. We saw MacFlecknoe up to 93, that is line number 93. Shadwell was chosen as a successor for Flecknoe to occupy the kingdom of nonsense. So, we will continue with that now. This is a satire on Shadwell as the son of Flecknoe. So, we will now move to the selected passages from line number 94 to 217 and analyze the poem, and then do a source study from a critic called Hammond. For this coronation function, we have some audience. Who are they? Here Dryden describes. Now Empress Fame had published the renown of Shadwell's coronation through the town. Roused by report of fame, the nations meet from near Burnhill and distant Watling Street. No Persian carpets spread the imperial way, but scattered limbs of mangled poets lay. From dusty shops neglected authors come, martyrs of pies and relics of the bum. Much Haywood, Shirley, Ogleby there lay, but loads of Shadwell almost choked the way. Bilked stationers for yeomen stood prepared, and Herringman was captain of the guard. The hoary prince in majesty appeared, high on a throne of his own labours reared. Shadwell is taken to the location of this coronation, and the audience are receiving him instead of the imperial way with the carpets and things like that. Here Shadwell is welcomed with the mangled, that is mutilated body of poets, publishers and others. Actually even the books, unused books, unsold books, they are all there, and the publisher is led by Herringman. He was the captain of the guard. The hoary prince is of course Flecknoe. The swearing in ceremony takes place. Let us read. At his right hand our young Ascanius sat, Rome's other hope and pillar of the state. His brows thick fogs instead of glorious grace, and lambent dullness played around his face. So Shadwell swore, nor should he vow be vain, that he till death true dullness would maintain, and in his father's right and realm's defence, now to have peace with wit, not truce with sense. The king himself sacred unction made, as king by office and priest by trade. In his sinister hand instead of ball he placed mighty mug of potent ale. Love's kingdom to his right he did convey, at once his sceptre and his rule of sway. We can see that this mock heroic poem is contrasted with the swearing in ceremony of Ascanius, the son of Aeneid, and instead of the ritualistic satires and the globe that the king, that is Ascanius, carried, here we find Shadwell carrying ale and his father's book, that is Love's Kingdom. It is a play by Flecknoe. On this occasion certain omens, good omens appear. So, we have some augury, that is good omen for this coronation function. Here again we have the contrast with the mythical figure Romulus, the founder of Rome. His temples last with poppies were overspread, that nodding seemed to consecrate his head. Just at that point of time, if fame not lie, on his left hand 12 reverend owls did fly. So Romulus, it sung by Tiber's brook, presage of sway from twice 6 vultures took. The admiring throng loud acclamations make, and omens of his future empire take. The sire then shook the honours of his head, and from his brows stamps of oblivion shed. Full on the filial dullness long he stood, repelling from his breast the raging god, at length burst out in this prophetic mode. So we find this good omens for this coronation ceremony, as we said earlier, Romulus is contrasted to show the vast distinction between mythical king on the one hand and this king of nonsense on the other hand. Now this is the time for Flecknoe to bless his son Shadwell. He offers his blessings. Heavens bless my son, from Ireland let him reign, to far Barbados on the western main. Of his dominion may no end be known, and greater than his father's be his throne. Beyond love's kingdom let him stretch his pen. He paused, and all the people cried, Amen. Then thus continued he, my son, advance, still in new impudence, new ignorance. Success let other teach, learn thou from me pangs without birth and fruitless industry. Let virtuosos in 5 years be writ, yet not one thought accuse thy toil of wit. Virtuoso is a play written by Shadwell. Flecknoe says, let Shadwell take 5 years to write this play and then show that he has not taken so much of effort to write this play. The dominion of Shadwell is such a great one, from Ireland to Barbados, and in between we have the vast land of water. So in effect, in this kingdom of nonsense, no human being would be there. The whole province of Shadwell is described here. This is thy province, this thy wondrous way, new humours to invent for each new play. This is that boasted bias of thy mind, by which one way to dullness it's inclined, which makes thy writings lean on one side still, and in all changes that way bends thy will. Nor let thy mountain belly make pretence of likeness, thine see a timpani of sense. A ton of man in thy large bulk is writ, but sure thou art but a kilderkin of wit. Like mine thy gentle numbers feebly creep, thy tragic muse gives smiles, thy comic sleep. The province that is ruled by Shadwell is a huge one, and then in this province humours will play a vital role. Comedy of humours inherited from Ben Jonson. Like Ben Jonson, Thomas Shadwell also had a tummy, huge tummy, and this tummy swelled because of this arrogance or dullness, and so Flecknoe says they are similar in that sense. So through this likeness between Shadwell and Ben Jonson, Dryden attacks both Flecknoe and Shadwell. The last one is really paradoxical. The intention of a tragic playwright is to move them to tears, but in comic we have the opposite, that is create laughter, but in the case of Shadwell everything is opposite. Comic play gives sleep and tragic play gives smiles. Flecknoe further continues to describe the genius of Shadwell. With whatever gall thou settest thyself to write, thy inoffensive satires never bite. In thy felonious heart though venom lies, it does but touch thy Irish pen and dies. Thy genius calls thee not to purchase fame in keen iambics but mild anagram. Leave writing plays and choose for thy command some peaceful province in acrostic land. There thou mayest wings display and altars raise, and torture one poor word 10,000 ways. The genius of Shadwell lies in writing drama, but Flecknoe tells him your genius will be much better if you start writing more anagrams and acrostics. Play with words. Punster, earlier we saw making puns, and play with one word in such a way that you extend it to a long sentence or you play with it for a long time. Further, Flecknoe draws a reference to the wings and altars, the kind of emblem poetry that was written during the early 17th century. After blessing his son, telling him about his province, genius and all that, Flecknoe suddenly disappears from the scene. That is the end of this satire on Flecknoe and Shadwell. Or if thou wouldest thy different talents suit, set thy own songs and sing them to thy lute, he said, but his last words were scarcely heard, for Bruce and Longville had a trap prepared, and down they sent the yet declaiming bard, sinking, he left his drugget robe behind, borne upwards by a subterranean wind, the mantle fell to the young prophet's part with double portion of his father's art. The double portion of his father's art is of course double dullness. The mantle falls on him and probably it is something like bundling him up into a piece of dirt, dullness. That is what we find at the end of this poem by Dryden. Bruce and Langwell are characters created by Shadwell. So, the entire scenario is coronation, but it is done with the wrong purpose in the kingdom of dullness, primarily for attacking Shadwell and Flecknoe, who were the enemies, professional enemies or social enemies of Dryden and his friends in a restoration period. If we pay attention to the contrasting words in this section that we have analyzed, we will see author and text, these two are contrasted, fame and neglect are contrasted. On the one hand we have book leaves which are used as toilet paper, on the one hand we have wit, and on the other dullness and knowledge, ignorance, success, failure, tragedy, comedy. We also at the end, the whole poem is a satire. What is the opposite of satire is a question I leave for you to understand, to find out and help yourself to find the thematic contrast within this poem as quite opposite to satire. There are certain technical aspects of MacFlecknoe that we can notice here. The whole poem is narrated by a narrator, and during this narration we find Flecknoe coming in and giving speech and describing Shadwell and all other situations. So, it is a kind of speech and narration, and this partly narrative, partly dramatic, that is what we find it, and the whole poem is presented in satirical mode by Dryden. A number of poetic devices are used by Dryden in this poem. Major part of this poem is dominated by irony. Like one example we have is mangled poets as carpets. This is a royal ceremony of coronation, but we do not have red carpet, but on the other hand we have disfigured bodies of bad poets. We have this oxymoron hoary prince. Hoary is old, aged. Actually in another context in the previous section we found Dryden using aged prince. Prince is supposed to be a young person, but here we have this oxymoron of old and young coming together. And like this royal or king metaphor in this poem, we have another major imagery, that is image of dirt. So, the books written by Flecknoe and Shadwell being used as toilet paper, that is the worst kind of image that one can think of using to attack one's enemy. We have the allusions to Ascanius, the son of Aeneas, by his first wife Creusa in the Roman mythology, and similarly we have another mythical reference, that is Romulus, considered to be the founder of Rome, and the son and the father, how they are transferring power to each other from Roman context is contrasted with what Flecknoe does with his own successor, that is Shadwell. Of course, to increase the effect of this satire and irony in this poem, Dryden uses hyperbole, particularly the level of dullness is expanded to rule a large kingdom. That is why the dominion from Ireland to Barbados, that is a vast ocean, but there is no human being for him to rule. And similarly we have this hyperbole, tummy is fine, belly is fine, but then we have mountain belly, that is Shadwell's belly. So, here we find that Dryden goes down to a level which is not acceptable to attack the very person of Shadwell. The paradox we find in this poem is, of course, thy tragic muse gives smiles, thy comic sleep. And another hyperbole that I find in this poem is, you play with, tinker with one word to create something big. That is why he says, and torture one poor word 10,000 ways to create anagrams or acrostics. The rhyme, rhythm and meter of this poem, they are all interesting for us to see how they are used to create this heroic couplet, to create this heroic effect or mock heroic effect in this poem. The whole poem is in rhymed iambic pentameter, that is heroic couplet. We have two triplets also in this section that we have discussed so far, lines 136 to 138, again next set of lines from 211 to 213. This kind of triplet being used in heroic couplet is used for the purpose of variation. Full on the filial dullness, long he stood, repelling from his breast the raging god, at length burst out in this prophetic mode. That this triplet announces the kind of speech that Flecknoe would make immediately after this. And next, in the next one, he said, that is Flecknoe said, but his last words were scarcely heard. Here this triplet prepares us to receive the information about Flecknoe's disappearance from the stage. So the narrator says, but his last words were scarcely heard, for Bruce and Longwell had a trap prepared, and down they sent the yet declaiming bard. He was shouting at yet he was pushed out of the scene. So the father is sent out, and now Shadwell has taken over the province to rule the kingdom of nonsense. We also have something more interesting about variation in the use of heroic couplets in this particular poem by Dryden. Two couplets come consecutively, so I call them double couplets, and so we can see these double couplets playing some role, particularly with reference to the publisher Herringman. Bilked stationers for yeomen stood prepared, and Herringman was captain of the guard. The hoary prince in majesty appeared, high on a throne of his own labours reared. It is not that Dryden attacks only Flecknoe and Shadwell. He also attacks people associated with Flecknoe and Shadwell. One of them is this publisher Herringman. Incidentally, he was also a publisher for Dryden. That is different. When it comes to attack, all are bundled together. The next one is triple couplets. Couplets in three successive form come together, like the previous one, two couplets coming together. Now we have three couplets in line number 139 and 144. Heavens bless my son. As you can see, this is a very important occasion in this coronation function, blessing the son. So it is not surprising that Dryden uses triple couplets. Heavens bless my son, from Ireland let him reign, to far Barbados on the western main. Of his dominion may no end be known, and greater than his father's be his throne. Beyond love's kingdom let him stretch his pen. He paused, and all the people cried, Amen. It is something like a liturgical performance, a ritual that is conducted in a church. Incidentally, Flecknoe was a priest, that is why in one place we have noted that priest by trade that Dryden refers to when he describes Flecknoe. In sum, we can form this impression of Dryden satire. MacFlecknoe is a mock heroic satire against Dryden's professional enemy Thomas Shadwell. Dryden designs Flecknoe to choose Shadwell as the king of nonsense to attack both the father and the son. We have an audience for the coronation who are equally stupid like authors and publishers. Dryden displays the difference between great kings on the one hand and stupid king Shadwell on the other hand by contrasting latter with Ascanius and Romulus in terms of occupying the throne and also referring to the augur that happened, like 12 owls flying. Lastly, we find Flecknoe blessing Shadwell to rule the vast unpopulated region of saline water from Ireland to Barbados, proclaiming Shadwell's stupidity. It is not a rule actually, it is proclamation of Shadwell's stupidity or dullness. Flecknoe disappears, throwing the mantle onto Shadwell, which may in fact cover him up into a bundle of dirt to be laughed at by the readers of Dryden. But we must remember, this judgment of Dryden on both Flecknoe and Shadwell may not be really true. It is a prejudiced view that he has given, that we must understand. Recent revisionary readings say that Shadwell was, or even Flecknoe was, not such a bad poet as Dryden attacked. There is a very interesting question raised by many readers of Dryden. Why did Dryden select Flecknoe as a man whose poetic kingdom Shadwell was to inherit? Hammond, a critic, has analyzed the material available to him and he has come up with some answers. Let us see the answers. Flecknoe was to some extent the epitome of a bad poet. There was a satire by Marvell on Flecknoe. It was published only in 1681. Some points of disputes between Dryden and Shadwell can be noted down. There are some 5 points. One is the estimate of Johnson. Dryden thought Johnson was inferior to Shakespeare, whereas Shadwell thought Johnson was superior to Shakespeare. Similarly, Dryden preferred the comedy of wit, whereas Shadwell preferred the comedy of humours. For Dryden, the purpose was to entertain as well, whereas Shadwell thought the purpose of comedy was to punish vices. And similarly, we have this value of rhymed plays and plagiarism. We have to remember that Shakespeare was a great playwright in blank verse, not in rhymed plays. Similarly, Shakespeare used resources from other writers, but it was not plagiarism completely. So, on these points Dryden, Shadwell differed, and in this context we also have to remember that Flecknoe also thought he was inheriting the tradition of Johnson, and so he created a Johnsonian image for himself. Like Dryden and Shadwell sharing or having differences, we find Flecknoe and Shadwell having some similarities. Flecknoe's attempt to be an arbiter of the world of letters, he was attempting to show himself, project himself as a man of letters giving judgments. Flecknoe dedicated his writings to the Duke of Newcastle. Flecknoe misused classicism to represent that was the only thing. Similarly, Flecknoe insisted that the function of drama was moralistic, and then Flecknoe attacked some good playwrights and friends of Dryden like Etheridge and Davenant. Similarly, Flecknoe satirized Thomas Killigrew, the manager of the King's Company, for which Dryden was writing his plays. So, whatever Flecknoe attacked, Shadwell shared and joined in some, together or separately, they were having the same purpose to attack Dryden and his friends. Now we see the father and the son coming together in Dryden's creation. Dryden, to write this satire, read the writing of Flecknoe. There was a travel book called A Relation of 10 Years Travels in Europe, Asia, Africa and America. In this travel writing, Flecknoe had described his meeting with the King of Portugal in 1648. He was travelling from Lisbon to Brazil, that also he has described, and even this idea of kingship for this kingdom that we find in this poem, Dryden found in these letters. The image of kingship from one of Flecknoe's letters was a source for Dryden. Flecknoe and Shadwell shared another habit of drinking, like that is also connected with Johnson, Ben Jonson. Then we find Flecknoe was more at home with creating anagrams and riddles for celebrities or people that fashionable people that he was familiar with, and he also wrote some specific epigrams celebrating the riches of Barbados. Many times Flecknoe had announced that he would retire from writing and from this public performance, but he did not do that for some time. He was making announcements, but he was coming in and he was actively involved in the public life even in 1676 when Dryden was writing this poem. So, Dryden chose Flecknoe as a suitable father for Shadwell for this particular poem. Thus, we find that Dryden chose Flecknoe as the father of Shadwell to attack both Flecknoe and Shadwell, and so he called Shadwell the son of Flecknoe, and he coined a new name, MacFlecknoe. What we have done in this lecture is to discuss lines from 94 to 217 to describe the actual coronation, and then to describe the blessings Flecknoe gave to his own son. Finally, we also looked at the source for Dryden to write this satire. One of the main sources for this satire is the writing by Flecknoe himself, apart from all the events that took place during this restoration period. Finally, this satire is very effective to convey Dryden's own feeling to the public at that particular point of time. One of the reasons for writing such satires is personal. The another reason is also professional, in the sense to promote good writers and prevent bad writers. We have some references which we hope you would find them useful. The source study reference is Hammond. If possible, look into it, you will find it very interesting. Thank you.